Daredevil is finally back after 7 years, and he returns in Born Again. And I was able to watch the first 2 episodes, so let's talk about it. First off, it's just nice to see these characters back on screen again. Although we mostly got Matt Murdock in these first few episodes, it's just nice to see Karen and Foggy back. Although Foggy wasn't that long, we still got to see him back again. And Karen, we didn't see a lot of her, but she was still in there. And I'm hoping Karen shows up more throughout the rest of the show. But it's just nice to see Matt Murdock again in this new story that they're telling. It's nice to see Fisk again in this story that they're telling. He's becoming mayor, and it's nice to see the journey of that. And Fisk versus Murdock again is always that conflict that you want in this type of show. And the show still feels like a Netflix show. It still feels like it was able to capture the tone, keyword there's tone, that those Netflix shows brought. It still has that mature side of it. It still has the brutal violence of it. And it still has the heavy dialogue scenes of those Netflix shows. And is still able to capture what that tone brought. Now yes, those dialogue scenes were a big part of those Netflix shows, and I'm glad to say that this show, the best part of these first 2 episodes, were the dialogue scenes. Especially in episode 2, and a few moments in 1, the dialogue scenes were the big standout of it. Like in episode 1 when Matt and Fisk were talking in that restaurant, that's what stand out. We saw it in the trailer. And then in episode 2, everything that we saw with White Tiger, I like those scenes too. And everything they did with Fisk in episode 2 as well was a standout. And the dialogue scenes were still able to bring what the Netflix shows brought. Speaking of White Tiger, I'm curious to see where that story goes. Is it going to be another Punisher situation where we take the route of what Daredevil season 2 did? And we kind of have a whole court case with that? Or is it going to try to do something new? Because we still have the showrunners of Season 2, so I can see it doing something that Season 2 did. But I also want them to take a new route with it and not really repeat plot points, because the Punisher is coming back at some point. And I just like the story and direction that they're going. Fisk is mayor, that's interesting. Matt is more brutal as ever now that Foggy's dead and he's retired as Daredevil. Now we know, of course, he's going to become Daredevil again and he's going to meet up with Punisher. So I'm curious to see where all these storylines will eventually go. I'm curious to see how they decide to wrap up this season. And I'm excited to see the journey there, because I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty good story to watch. But I did have a lot of problems with these first 2 episodes. Now before I dive into something, I just want to give my big problems that I kind of have so far. Now these are kind of nitpicks, but they're pretty noticeable, especially if you compare it to the Netflix stuff. Now I know this isn't really fair to compare it to the Netflix stuff, but when you have basically a season 4 of a show, and you had really good seasons of it already, and you're trying to continue off of that show, of course you're going to be comparing it to that show, and it's not really going to meet those expectations. But just the look of the show feels different. It's because it has a higher budget. Netflix kind of kept the budget a bit lower, but Disney of course has that money, and they're going to throw money into a project. So the show's budget is just higher, and it looks like that, which is a problem, because there's a look about those Netflix shows that just had that look to it, that cheap look to it, that fit the show really well, and just this new high quality look didn't really fit Daredevil perfectly, so it just looks a little off. And in episode 1 where Daredevil was actually Daredevil, the CGI looked off. Like, the green screen and CGI, you can tell it was obviously green screen and CGI, which is disappointing because there was like no CGI at all in the original show. It's all practical. And then you get to here, and it's heavily on CGI. I hope that's not really a thing moving forward, but if it is, kind of disappointing. Now I said it's not fair to compare the writing of the show to Netflix's, because like I said, Netflix is just an entirely different skill. They knew what they were doing. Born Again, compared to these first 2 episodes, it's not really bringing what those first 3 seasons of Daredevil brought. It is nowhere near as good as those seasons. which is disappointing, but yet again, I kind of expected that, and my expectations were a bit too high. Just these first 2 episodes don't really bring the same flair that those Netflix stuff brought. Although these few episodes are good, it's just not on the same level as that, and that's kind of disappointing because that's kind of what we all want. And those first 15 minutes of episode 1. Now, the story-wise, Foggy's death, perfect. But the way they wrote it, the way they filmed it, I hated. Now this is really the only action scene we get, so it's kind of hard to judge it because this is the only one we have. But the way this one was filmed was awful. You have Foggy dying over here, you have a bunch of action happening, and you're trying to film it all in this one-shot take, and it doesn't look good. If you ask me, Foggy's death should have been emotional. It needed to have that emotional impact. It did, but it was rushed. Extremely rushed. And I feel like if Netflix wrote this part, they would have used the entirety of the episode to tell this segment. This 17 minutes in this episode would have been an hour-long episode. And it kind of just feels like it needed that. Because Foggy's death just feels brushed over. It feels like we're rushing these first 15 minutes just to get to the main plot. Now these first 15 minutes, story-wise, great idea. Well, not to kill off Foggy, because I like Foggy, but just the idea to kill him off for the story-wise. Story-wise, the scene was great, but filming-wise, the big one-shot action scene that they tried to do just didn't turn out well, and it needed a stronger emotional impact. The emotional impact lasted for a minute when Foggy's heartbeat cut off. We see Matt crying, and that's it. We needed more. We didn't really get to see Karen's reaction all the way, just briefly, and we needed more. Too much was happening in that scene. It felt extremely choppy, and it just felt like it wanted to jump to the story and just get the story rolling, while in reality, I feel like those first 15 minutes just should have been an episode of a show. Now yes, I do like Born Again for what they're doing with the story so far. Now it is only the first 2 episodes, so it's kind of hard to judge the show just based from that. But story-wise, I like the direction that they're going. But it's really hard to watch this show when you're comparing it to Netflix. Don't put your expectations there because it is nowhere near those expectations. Now, the way episode 2 ended, I'm excited to see what they're going to do for the rest of the show. And I'm hoping it matches those heights of the Netflix stuff. But right now, since it's not really on that tier, I kind of came out disappointed for these first 2 episodes. And I'm hoping the rest of the show is able to bring me back, or else the show's going to be a massive disappointment for me. And I don't want that. Now I'm going to try something different and not do a week-to-week review. Like I did last year, I did a week-to-week and reviewed every single episode every single week. I'm going to try something else and just review the first 2 episodes and then review the entirety of the show at the end. Anyways, if you like this video, maybe these ones on the side will interest you too. Like, subscribe, and see you guys next time. Goodbye.